is where among these companions do I fit in? You know, the biggest fear that I have all the time, this anxiety that I get, is that if I saw this massive army of Yazid of 30,000 soldiers, would I stay by my Imam's side? If I saw this gigantic army, and on the other side I saw a small group of believers, upright, pious, moral, and God-fearing, I wonder if me personally, if I would have stayed with the Imam or ran away. The Imam says, is there anyone who will come to my aid? Who among humanity is there to help me? Who's there to aid me? And I don't know. Maybe because of my pursuit of material gains, or my love of this world, or my fear of death, I'd say, Imam, I love you, but I can't stay with you. There are 500 million lovers of Ahlul Bayt, of the Prophet's family in this world today. And how many of us think and really wonder how strong we are that when faced with our moral obligation or our duty, whatever that is in our personal lives, that when we're faced between truth and falsehood, between right and wrong, will we have the strength to stand up for the truth, even if we are alone? It takes a lot of time and effort, brothers and sisters. People who are healthy and really fit, they go to the gym. They don't just wake up one day and look great. It takes a lifetime commitment for this physical health and benefit. But how much of this lifetime commitment are we giving to our spiritual selves and to the bigger purpose of life? Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate you guys being here on the weekend. Really shows your commitment to fighting for Imam Hussein's message and for standing up for truth and justice in the world. So please recite as-salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Please recite out loud salawat for the tawfiqat of Brother Aziz.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
As Brother Aziz mentioned, that Imam Hussain said that those who remain silent while others are oppressed are guilty of oppression themselves. This message in itself tells us that we all, each one of us, has a duty to speak up against oppression and what is happening around the world. How we should raise our voices for those who have been silenced. Now I'd like to call upon a sister from the Azhar Center, Sister Zainab Latif, to please come and say a few words. Please recite a loud salawat for Sister Zainab Latif.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much for this great opportunity to contribute to Imam Hussein's remembrance. So there are three groups, as history and every generation repeats. And there are always three groups that react to injustice, to the acts of injustice differently. There are those who stand with injustice. When they see it, they actually stand and support the oppressor. There are those who stand against it and fight it. And there is the biggest group, and they are the apathetic bystander. The bystander that watches and does not react and does not act in any way to stop this injustice or oppression happening. Now, every time and every one of us will have to have a choice of which one of these groups we want to be part of. During Imam Hussain alayhi salam's time, during the time where he stood against an oppressive leader, someone who was actually morally corrupt, who was a drunkard, who wanted to be the leader of the Muslims, and he was neither a Muslim nor a leader. Imam Hussain did not, no matter how much and how many threats of violence and death came to him, he did not back down to pledge allegiance to a man who was so corrupt, who would never be a good representative of the Muslims, or actually any group of people. So he escaped Medina with again threats to his life, and was on his way to the people of Kufa who had pledged their support for him. But Yazid, this leader, this immoral leader, stopped him on his way to Kufa. They stopped him in the plains of Karbala, in the middle of the desert, with only 72 companions left to support him, and tens and thousands of men in an army of Yazid to surround him. The people in Kufa were intimidated by threats and imprisonment and killing, and did not respond successfully to the call of Imam Hussain, even though they had said their support to him. And because of this, Imam Hussain alayhi salam died alone after 3 days, as mentioned before, with no food, no water, surrounded by his companions, his family, children, to face a very, very evil regime, and he did not back down at any point. He died on the plains of Karbala, and his family were captivated. They were captives under the evil regime of this so-called leader. But what was the result? Was it worth it, what he did? So many people died, such a difficult end to his family and himself. Did he achieve what he went out? There's a term, they say losing the battle and winning the war. This is maybe something we can apply to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And we can see it out of the evidence of what's happened since 1400 years ago, since he had given his life away. We can see this all over the world. Firstly, thousands and millions, actually millions of Muslims gather in Muharram, and on the 40th of his death, they gather to remember him. They cry, they give food out of the generosity of his love, and his remembrance is never, ever abated, no matter how much time has passed since the day he died alone on the plains of Karbala. Quite opposite, in fact. It is only strengthened year after year as people look back and understand and comprehend the great and immense message that he left us with. His gesture of sacrifice was exactly what we needed 1400 years ago and also into the future, for us to gain strength and to understand further what we need to do when we stand against injustice. We have, these ceremonies and remembrances of his followers is till today as frightening as it was back at the time of his death. To the point, I come from Iraq, so Saddam Hussein at the time of his regime used to kill people who would remember him. He would kill people who would be associated with him, and he would prevent people from visiting his shrine every year. Do you think this stopped them? No. Many people would work in many different ways, trying to reach the shrine of Imam Hussain every Muharram and every Arba'in. They were lesser numbers then, especially with this kind of regime, but they never stopped. We have people like the likes of ISIS that came up in the Middle East recently that hold a belief that is basically in support of Yazid. They are the Yazids of our time now. And they killed anyone who was called Ali, Zainab, Hussein. Why do you think this is? What is it about Imam Hussain does the likes of the modern day Yazids or the modern day oppressors fear in the message of Imam Hussain right now? It rattles them. They are unable to control it. They can control everyone. What can they control them with? With money and power. We can bribe us with luxurious material things. But the love of Imam Hussain makes us transcend beyond the material world. We have a higher meaning in our life. And for this reason, no matter who stands in our way, no matter what we lose, sacrifice becomes part of who we are. And as a follower of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, we do not back down. We do not allow the Yazids of our time right now to take over. They will not buy us, and they will not scare us away. But in actual fact, they will lose. And they know this. They know this very well. And this is why modern day oppressors are afraid, so fearful of the Shia. And that is why they are the opposers of the Shia. Anyone who opposes the lovers of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is an oppressor. It doesn't work any other way. We go back to those three groups. Now, as followers, and as mentioned, we have millions of followers all over the world who put their love with Imam Hussain alayhi salam and are inspired by him. But I ask you this, are we truly the Shia? Can we call ourselves the Shia of Imam Hussain? Do our everyday acts connect with his sacrifice? Is Imam Hussain inside of us? Is his energy and spirit in everything we say and do? Are we those who will stand against injustice with him? Are we those who will stand with the injustice because it's easier, but because of material gain and whatsoever? Like the people of Kufa, will we fail to stand against the injustice? Or will we become the apathetic bystander, which I think in this group is the worst? The apathetic bystander stands and watches. There were men who watched Imam Hussain die. They were not part of the army of Yazid, but at the same time they did not stand with his ranks. They were not part of the lucky 72 who stood against him. Are we going to be the apathetic bystander when we see our fellow Muslims, or even any human? We don't need to only look out for our own. We should look out as Muslims, as followers of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. We should be looking out for everyone. Do we see it when we see how people are being mistreated, whether in this country, whether it is around the world? Are we engaged enough to support them? Are we sacrificing enough of our time or enough of our actions to support their struggle? I am sure all of us here, including, I'm talking to myself as well, we can all step up. The reason for this is because we want to be with Imam Hussain alayhi salam when we come back into this world, when we go into the hereafter. We want to be amongst his followers. We want to be counted amongst the ones who stood by him. This is what we read in Ziyarah. If we do, we need to step up in our actions. That means on social media, in our speeches, in our talks with our friends, and also within ourselves. The first step to fighting injustice would be within ourselves. We need to eliminate the many aspects, the negative aspects that we carry, the burdens, the sins that we carry, before we can fight the external fight, and that is racism, disunity, hatred, intolerance that we carry within our cultural baggage that we inherit, and truly go beyond these superficial and human-created divisions. For us to be really called a follower of Imam Hussain, and then for us to be a fighter for him, that would make us then in our actions and in our words. I'm ending now just with a point. We are now living at this moment in a time where the levels of hatred, racism, injustice, and aggression have reached levels that have not been at this high for a long time in history. We have never seen members of the far right in the West have so much strength and power, well, since a long time ago. There is a re-emergence of hatred, of aggression, of intolerance, all around the world, not just in the West. And we need to be ready for this increase, because it will only increase, it's not going to decrease by itself. And we need to be armed with the knowledge of Imam Hussain to be able to fight it. This is going to be for our children, and this is going to be for our grandchildren. The life they're going to live is going to be a different one, that we are the comfortable one that we have right now. We need to step away from the love and comfort of our life right now and start to take serious action against the infringements to justice on every level. It is only this way can we save not only our children, but everyone, in the way of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And before I end, I just created a poem, a small poem that comes from the point of view of an Iraqi immigrant entering into Canada, just so we understand what we're dealing with. I ran from the oppressors of the Middle East. I ran away from the sectarian beast. I ran from its clutches and its deadly fate. I ran away from the architects of hate. I ran away from the controlling thought police. I ran from the propaganda yearning for peace. I ran across the world, far from familiarity. I ran with hope in my heart, hope shining brightly. I ran till I stopped in a